Hi everyone, Caleb Peterson here. This podcast is all about the accelerated learning class that's beginning in 2017 at Parktone Primary School. And originally this clip that I'm posting on Compass was supposed to be a recording of the information session that I ran last night on the 27th of October 2016. Only we had a few technical difficulties with batteries running out of the various devices which were responsible for recording, and so it was a bit choppy and changing. So I thought what I'll do is have a go at doing a podcast and posting that on Compass instead. And I will cover everything that was discussed at last night's meeting, so you have a good idea of all the information that you need to know about the direction that we're heading in, and to help you make an informed decision relating to your own child's placement in a class like the accelerated learning class. So I started off by talking a little bit about the structure as we know it for next year, and that's that we've got 2 straight grade 5 classes, 2 straight grade 6 classes, 1 great composite class of 5, 6 high achievers, and that part has all been sorted out, all those enrolments. There's a different selection process involved for that class, and we had an information session on that about the high achievers and what's going on with that all last term, and now we're going through the same process but a very different selection process for our accelerated learning class, and that will also be a 5-6 composite class. And the reason that we're calling it an accelerated learning class, it's been referred to, if there's a high achievers class, is this the low achieving class? And in its infancy, or even beyond its infancy, at the very beginning it was just referred to or thought about as those students who might be lower in their academic achievement compared to their peers, and those are the students that we might be looking for this class. But accelerated learning really is a label that could be applied to either of those classes, the accelerated learning class or the high achievers class, because one of the key components of that both of them share is that we're expecting the students to grow 18 months minimum in a 12-month period. So they're in this class, there's a whole lot that's been specifically designed to accelerate their learning beyond what would be expected. And for those in the accelerated learning class, we think that that's more than fair, given that they've now had a number of years where perhaps they've performed less than they've had less growth in 12 months than expected over that period of time. So let's talk a little bit about what one of the things I wanted to discuss, or I discussed last night, was the reason that we've got a need for this class. Now, we do our best, but we do our best, and the reason we haven't got a class at the moment is because we have been doing our best, and we will continue to do our best, just like almost every other primary school does, and secondary school does. But we believe we can do better. And that's how the high achievers and the accelerated learning class were born, out of a set research that's been carrying on since the beginning of this year. And for the first half of this year, predominantly was spent around the researching, surveying, focus groups and the like, and of course looking at feedback from parent feedback through to student and peer feedback. The surveys that we've got, parents were saying, come on, are we really catering for our highly able students? Some were saying gifted students, and are we really catering for those students who seem to be falling further and further behind? And so we've listened to that, and we've also looked predominantly at the research and what we are capable of offering. We're in a fairly healthy position. Most schools won't go down this pathway, not because it isn't the right thing to do for their children, but simply because we're functioning within a system that that has its flaws. And I'm almost always an advocate of the Department of Education and all that we stand for in our unified mission to educate children in Victoria. However, I'm not alone amongst principals, and George and I are not alone amongst principals who have now for the last 10 years or more been recognising that there's a system-wide issue with the way in which we deliver education that at today's pace, when in today's pace we could do better. And with all that's available to us today, we could do better. And what I mean by that is that the system that we work within and that you've been schooled within is that we have a curriculum, and in any given year, so let's say the year 5 year, there is all of these learning outcomes that the students are expected to demonstrate their understanding of and show that they are able to meet the grade 5 standard of all of these outcomes in maths, in English, literacy, numeracy, science, ICT, Japanese, PE. And we've got 1 year to fit all these in, and the ongoing teacher complaint is that it's a crowded curriculum. There's a lot to cover. And so we assess our students against each of these standards. And we know, and we completely accept, that there are some students, whilst it's a grade 5 curriculum, some students are still grappling with the concepts at grade 4, at the beginning of grade 4 through to the end of grade 4. And some of them are beyond the grade 5 curriculum and are working already well into the grade 6 and even year 7 curriculum. But and that's okay, because, as I said before, we do our best, and we've got a system, an education system, who in the last 10 years has dedicated a lot of resource, time and money into helping staff to understand how to differentiate curriculum and how to create individualised curriculums for students where possible. And we've got some outlier students, some students who are due to learning difficulties have other reasons as to why they are not able to meet that curriculum, and sometimes we modify, and that's very different to differentiating. And so we've got funding in place for that, and there's support mechanisms there. But the differentiated curriculum is what teachers have been trained to do, and it's a very difficult thing to do. It's certainly the more advanced, I won't say advanced teachers, let's just say it's a difficult thing to do, to differentiate your class. But nonetheless, we do our best to do that. And we do it quite well for the year level below and the year level above. But beyond that, we're talking about the two extremes, those who are high achievers and those who have significant gaps in their learning. We could do better. We do our best, but we could do better. And that's why, if we look at the cohort of our grade 5s and 6s for next year, there's 130 students. And there's 30 students that we're aiming to do better for, because they're sitting in their class and they're not getting in that differentiated curriculum what they need to be growing 12 months in 12 months. So we've got a bunch of high achieving students who are not growing, are now at a point where they're no longer growing 12 months or demonstrating 12 months growth in the curriculum over a period of 12 months. And we've got students whose gaps are so significant in their learning that they're really not picking up what's being put down, and so they too are not able to demonstrate any level of growth, because where their starting point needs to be is already behind the breadth of, the limits of our differentiated curriculum. So I kind of want to give you all an idea of what I'm talking about when I say the extreme. And because this is an information session on the accelerated learning class, I want to give you a bit of a feel for what it's like for a student in that extreme who's tackling the grade 5 curriculum. So I'm going to play I'm right into Sal Khan's Khan Academy at the moment, and a lot of Sal Khan's work since 2011. He's posted a whole lot of basically every concept in maths that can be taught in a sequence, all the way through to adulthood, university level. And so what I'd like to, and he breaks it down in such a way that it's fairly easy to pace your own learning if you follow his videos and then do the exercises that he's laid out. And people are doing that. It's free as well, which is quite incredible. Anyway, I'm going to show you I'm going to refresh you, do a little bit of a refresher with one of Sal Khan's videos. I'm going to take you into the classroom, and I want you to watch the teaching that's going on here, and I want you to participate like you're a student, and I want you to learn what it is that is being taught. Now we're going to have a refresher on Laplace transform, which is all about differential equations, and we're going to put you in about a semester 2 specialist class of maths in year 12. So here we go. Let's see.
So, first of all, let me just rewrite the definition of the Laplace transform. So it's the L from Laverne and Shirley. So the Laplace transform of some function of t is equal to the improper integral from 0 to infinity of e to the minus st times our function of t, and it's with respect to dt. So let's do another Laplace transform. Let's say that we want to take the Laplace transform. Let's say we want to take the Laplace transform. And now our function f of t, let's say it is e to the at.
Okay, now concentrate. Focus now.
The at, well, we just substituted into this definition of the Laplace transform. So that is equal to, and this is all going to be really good integration practice for us, especially integration by parts. Almost every Laplace transform problem turns into an integration by parts problem, which, as we learned long ago, integration by parts is just the reverse product rule. So anyway, this is equal.
Don't you remember that when we learnt that?
E to the
concentrate. This part's really important.
E to the minus st times e to the at. Right, that's our f of t.
Got that? It's our f of t.
Well, this is equal to just adding the exponents because we have the same base. The integral from 0 to infinity of e to the what? A minus s. E to the a minus s.
Now stay focused. If only you can concentrate, then you will understand this.
And what's the antiderivative of this?
If you don't concentrate, you just won't get it. Let's figure out the antiderivative.
With respect to t, so we're at, it's equal to 1.
You get the idea. I wonder if you could be honest at home there watching this, whether you would be sitting there going, okay, yeah, I don't know what was going on there. Because for those of us who have been out of school, or if we're not, that's the sort of maths thing you would go on to use as an engineer or in an engineering's course, and engineers may or may not need to use that. But unless we are in that position, I would suggest that so many of us would be feeling well out of our depth with that level of maths, and being expected to learn and understand what's being talked about there. But don't dismay, I want to show you now an actual grade 5 version of that. So if we go back, this is once again one of about 1,500 videos that would go before you learn Laplace transform. Let's have a look at evaluating expressions with and without parentheses. And hopefully at home more of us now understand.
This would have think about whether this expression.
Let's understand what's going on here.
Whether this expression right over here would evaluate the same way whether or not we had parentheses. So to think about that, let's first think about how it would evaluate if we have the parentheses. So if we have the parentheses, we want to do whatever in the parentheses first. And so here we have 8 minus 3, which is equal to 5. So this simplifies to 5 times 8 minus 3. And now we want to do the multiplication before we do subtraction. This goes back to order of operations. You do your multiplication and division first. Well, you do your parentheses first. Then, if you have multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction all in a row, you want to do your multiplication and your division first. So here we're going to multiply 5 times 8 to get 40, and then we're going to subtract 3 to get 37. Now let's think about what this would evaluate to if we did not have the parentheses. So it would be 8 minus 3 times 8 minus 3. So we just have to remind ourselves about the order of operations. The convention is to do your multiplication first. So you're actually going to multiply the 3 times the 8 before you subtract it from this 8, and then before you subtract this 3. So we took away the parentheses, but the order of operations say, hey, do this multiplication first. We could even put a parenthesis here to emphasize that. So this will become 8 minus 24. So let me write it this way. 8 minus 24 minus 3. 8 minus 24 minus 3. Now 8 minus 24 is negative 16. You subtract another 3, you're going to get to negative 19. So clearly you get very, very different values depending on whether or not you have parentheses.
Okay, hopefully sitting at home you're thinking, okay, thank goodness I actually do understand lots of what's going on there. And most of our students do, but there are the extremes. And those are the students who I'm talking about are the ones that even watching that year 5 little explicit teaching on use of parentheses, they would feel like you and most of us did when I showed you the first video, whereby it's just a muddle of confusion and okay, I would be really struggling to keep up with that because I actually don't understand what's going on. So that is how some of our students feel day in and day out. So, and even when the teacher, and it's not until the teachers normally they'll come alongside when they're differentiating and they'll explain the lower version of that and how to get to that point, but there's still some gaps. The gaps are so broad for some of our students that it would actually take a one-on-one on addressing them back at the level of which they are currently working on, which might be so unrelated, seemingly so unrelated. It's all related. If it's place value in there, and order of operations and algebra, all works into that at some point, or writing expressions and the like. But the teacher has to really go back and almost sit one-on-one. Now, if you've got a class of 22, 23, 24, 25, that is very difficult to do. So I want to discuss a slightly different paradigm than you might have thought about when you're thinking about your child and perhaps their well-being. One of the parents last night brought up the issue of well-being. These kids are, there's a lot of stigma around, dating back to the 80s even and beyond. There's a stigma around streaming. There's a stigma around being in a special class. For some parents, the stigma goes back to recalling when kids got off the blue bus and they were a target for being on that blue special bus. And so there's all these stigmas that need to, and I would like for us to think of them as hurdles. Frame them as a hurdle, and a hurdle is inherently there to overcome or to jump it. And we wish there wasn't any, and we will do our very best to minimize these, but a stigma is is such because it hangs around. It's there, it's prevalent. It's not prevalent, it's present, and it's history that allows, and people within cycling history that allow that stigma to stay around. So we need to be the ones that break it down. It's going to take a unified effort, both at home and at school. You see, just like any other form of teasing, taunting, bullying, we would not tolerate any teasing of any students just because they're in a different group. In fact, and one of the parents said, well, that does happen, and my child has expressed that they have been teased. And another parent said, well, my child expresses concern, but it's more concern from themselves, not that they're being teased, but they have this pressure on themselves that they want to be doing better than they actually are capable of, and they're trying their best, and they get all worked up and upset themselves because they don't feel that they can, so they actually feel that they are dumb, and they're not dumb. And that's something that we can and are addressing by having this accelerated learning class. Because if you think about it, that first video that I showed on Laplace transform, just because you didn't get it and I didn't get it, or the vast majority of adults don't get it, does that mean that we're dumb? No, not at all. We just need to sequence our concepts from the point of mastery that we do have all the way up to there. And as I said before, there's about 1,500 different lessons that we would need to have between a grade 5 math and learning Laplace transform. But if you're willing, the things that we do need to do is not only have all those lessons, but keep having them at the pace that we require until we've mastered them. And once you've mastered that one concept that you require, then you go on to the next one, and so on until you get to Laplace transform. And beyond that, all sorts of fun with exponentials and differential calculus. So, just because we haven't doesn't mean we're dumb. It means that we have got some fairly significant gaps in our maths learning, and we had actually no need to take our maths learning that far. But at primary school, we say that actually all of our curriculum is relevant, and it's a foundation. It's really considered a foundation for further learning. So if I go back to that system-wide problem that we've got, and I'm going to retouch again on the welfare side of things. I'll come back to that, but I want to recap on that idea that there's a system-wide problem with the way we deliver education. If we've got that curriculum that's all supposed to be squeezed into 1 year, then of course pace is a problem. We teach, we assess, we teach. Okay, I've done all the teaching and I've assessed, and I actually really need to move on because otherwise there's no way I'm going to be able to fit everything else in. But just telling you for that unit of work and that concept, well done, you got a 95%, great, you got 100%, great, you got 70%, 50%, that you, well done, you still passed, we've passed. There's a problem with that. There's a problem with that because then you're not mastering that concept. Which means, what do we do with that gap? That 50% gap, that 5% gap, that 30% gap? We go and put more learning on top that actually pre-requires the last learning to be mastered. That's our system-wide problem. We don't have this in any other industry. If we were to, Sal Khan talks about applying that mode of thinking to another industry, and he gives the good example, like I did on Compass, about the construction. If we were to apply that to construction and lay down a foundation, and I was the inspector and I came along at the foundation level, I said, well done, that's 95% great. great work. And that's 50% your side over there. 50%, good. You've got 50% of the foundation done, but we've got to move on. So go ahead and build the next level. You over there, that site, builders, great, good foundation. It's 70%. I'll give that a 70%. But keep going. We're on a timeline here, so let's build the next level. And I come back at the next level and I say, well done to you. You've got 50%. Good for that level, and 70% for that level, and 95% for that level. And then, but we've got it on a timeline, so let's keep going. You get the idea. By the time we get to the third and fourth level, the whole thing's crumbling down because we've got a poor foundation, and because we're building upon gaps. It doesn't work. Our system, when there's X number of gaps exceed the differentiated limits of a teacher, then the system does not work. So we at Parktone Primary School, we can't change the whole system, but we do our best within it, and now we feel we can do even better. We can offer even more, because we're in a fairly healthy position, and this is fairly costly what we're trying to do. But the fact is, if we continue to build our children's education, those in the extreme, with those gaps, then in high school, their entire education will collapse. And this is where I now want to come back to that welfare and well-being. Because while the stigma attached and the teasing that may occur but would very, very quickly get squished is a hurdle to jump over, what I want you to change your thinking or think further into the future about is what are we doing for their welfare of their whole of them as a whole learner. If we're sending them off to secondary school and that by year 9, I've got a secondary background, I've been an assistant principal at a secondary school as well, and I've seen what happens even from year 7 on, but year 9 predominantly, of students who have given up. So, and they've given up not only education, not only listening to the teacher, because there's no point, they can't actually understand anything because the gaps have compiled upon each other and their education now has collapsed for them. But they give up on themselves and they lose all their confidence. And then they feel that they're dumb. And they feel that they can't actually do anything. And they can't learn. And that there's something wrong with them. And that's very sad. And then, which is why I really think we need to get over these little hurdles in order to look after the long-term welfare and well-being of these children in this category, in this situation. Because I can tell you now, a lot of secondary schools do streaming of their entire classes, and they do so based purely on their academic figures. We here at Parktone are going to set up an accelerated learning class, and I'll talk to you through what it is and what it isn't in just a moment. But we're doing so knowing the children, knowing those children, what they are capable of, more of who they are as a person than any secondary will ever, when they go to place students in appropriate learning groups. Now, let's touch on let's touch on the hurdle and the stigma attached. It's often way more in our adult minds than it is in the children's minds. We already at Parktone, we have students in likability groups, say in 5, 6, in all of the year levels really, but in grade 5, 6, the students are placed in a likability group for their mental maths, which runs 4 times in the week, for their smart words spelling, which runs 4 times in the week, and for their reading and comprehension, which depending on the week runs either 2 or 3 times throughout the week. And so the students mix. And I should point out at this point that our students in our High Achievers class and our students in the Accelerated Learning class will still be involved in all of those groups. So if they happen to be, their ability in maths will be looked at, and they may end up in a mental maths group with students from even the high achievers class, or even from the other straight grade 5 or straight grade 6 class. Same with the spelling standard. Now, the reason I point that out is not to say how the curriculum is going to be run, because it's a lot more complex than that. But I do point that out because I want to say that we've been doing that for years now, for a couple of years now, and as far as we're aware, we don't have the issues of stigma attached to the various groups. The students have since prep been placed into various likability groups, and our students through the 7 Habits learn that we each have our own talents, and some of us are good at some things and some of us are good at other things, and we just we try and target or focus on and direct our energies towards working on those things that we need to know that we just aren't as good at as we can or should be. So, yes, let me gather my thoughts. All right, I know that this is jumping a little bit from here to there to whatever, but hopefully when you hear the end of this, you'll see it sort of as a whole, what we're trying to achieve. So at this point, I want to discuss what it is not. I see this accelerated learning class is not a place to dump behaviour students. Now, we recognise that some students have behaviour issues because of the work that's been presented to them at the level that it's been presented, and if you can understand if a 10 or 11-year-old is constantly in a class where it's a massive confusion for them and not making sense. A good way to avoid feeling dumb is to distract or deflect what it is that's going on in class, so behaviour issues can arise. That's not to say that we won't be accepting any students with behavioural issues in there, because what we are interested in are the students who, when given the appropriate task that they can achieve in, that their behaviour issue subsides. One of the main aims of this program is to bring back a sense of achievement, a sense of success, that I can learn, that I do know things, that I'm not dumb, I can have confidence in myself as a learner, and I know how I need to learn. And that's a huge component of what this accelerated learning class is about. Another thing that it isn't, it's not a place to put our students with additional needs and funding. And that's once again not to say that we won't have students with additional needs in there. But when we talk about students with additional needs and students with funding, there is an enormous array of students within that. We've got students on the autism spectrum, we've got students with severe behaviour, we've got students with intellectual disabilities. And each and every one of them have their own assessment plans and own sets of assessment that come along with them that help guide us as to how to best individualise the teaching and learning for them. And so if it is suitable that this particular class would benefit them, then of course they would be in there. But if it's not, then they won't be. And so I guess now is a good time to say, well, why do we think this is going to work? One of the key reasons is we're going to have 12, this is a class of 12 students. Never fear, we've currently got a grade 6 class of 25 students, and our other grade 5s and 6 classes next year will have about 25 students. But, hold on, I've got students knocking at my door. Not sure where I was quite up to. Something I think about class sizes, so we've currently got a grade 6 class with 25 in it, and the 2 grade 5 classes, the 2 grade 6 classes will also have 25 in it. But having 12 students in our accelerated learning class will certainly, if you think about it, that allows so much more teacher time. We're also going to have an educational support staff member almost permanently in that class and the neighbouring class, one of the neighbouring classes. The class will be placed in the main building with all of their other peers. It's going to have a number of grade 6 students in it, and we want those grade 6 students, just like the ones in the High Achievers class and in the straight classes, to all be with each other in the same place, or participating in all the same things. The grade 6 camp, they all go on the grade 6 camp. Grade 5 camp, they go on their grade 5 camp. Those remaining obviously have additional special attention. All of their other specialists are run exactly the same. Rachel Ellis, our current Japanese teacher, has had a wealth of experience dealing with remedial students in both primary and secondary settings, and she will be our accelerated learning teacher. So now I guess there's one last thing to discuss, and that's the selection process. I really want everybody to understand that. It's a case of, obviously we have, as teachers, we see on a daily basis the struggles that students might have with the differentiated curriculum that's been pitched at them across the curriculum. And so it's the teachers first who I will go to. It doesn't mean that that's the priority, but I'll go to the teachers first, and I have actually already done so. And I've asked from them, based on their academic records and their social and their understanding of how social well-being and their ability to and how they might go with a class like the accelerated learning class. I've asked a priority listing from the teachers who currently teach grade 4 and grade 5 students to find the 12 students who would most need and most benefit from the accelerated learning class. The next step is to obviously have this information session, which I had last night, and to broadcast this recording. And then the next week, what I would like to do is to call parents two sets of parents: those who have registered an interest for their child, and those who may not have registered but who the teachers all feel would certainly benefit, that the child would certainly benefit. So those who were at the session last night, I got them to fill out a form just like this one, just with their name on it. For you sitting at home, I would love for you to drop me an email, and in dropping me an email on peterson.caleb.c@edumail.vic.gov.au. Just a real simple email that says, please give me a call about my child. I'm interested. It's not a commitment, but it's an interest in hearing more about whether that could be appropriate for your child. Oh, there's some Aussie. And we'll take it from there. So when I'm calling, I'm not calling to say your child is going to be enrolled, because one of the key things is that we need to be on board with this together. So you need to be the one who ends up making the decision as to whether your child accepts a place in the accelerated learning class. Because so it might be the teacher recommendation, and I'll be talking to you about it. But if you don't want your child in that class for whatever set of reasons, and you know your child in ways that we don't know them, then that's completely fine. And they will be placed into one of the regular classes. Okay, one of our parents brought up Hattie's work. For those of you who don't know, Hattie did a metadata analysis, probably one of the more extensive metadata analyses done in education, and what it was all about was looking at effect sizes. So if we do this, what effect does that have? What size effect does that have on student learning? So and this parent said, well, hold on, you've got a class of 12, but Hattie's work says that effect size on class size has a very small, if no, real effect size on learning. And I guess what I would challenge there is that a closer look at the metadata analysis would show that what is meant by class size a difference in class size under that analysis is the difference between, say, a class of 28 versus 25, or 25 versus 23, or even 24 versus 28. And there's not really any difference on learning according to that. But what we're talking about a far more significant number here. Going from 24 down to 12 is of far greater significance, and so that's outside of that. But the other while we're talking about Hattie, I guess one of the key things that we should recognise is that the number one that affects class, that affects learning, is the teacher and the quality of the teacher in front of the students. So we're very proud to be offering Rachel Ellis and all that she brings to that class. The second one, and it's always hard as a principal to bring about this point, but the second greatest influence on learning is that of the principalship. So which kind of makes sense as to why we're trying this. And it's not just trying it, what we're putting our names and our reputation on. And it will actually have an impact on the learning. I have no doubt about that. And so I guess we're going to have a number of different parents' response to that, and I guess the whole program as a whole. We're going to have some parents who will grab the opportunity with both hands and say, please put my child in that class. That would be the best thing for them. We're going to have some that are more sceptical. Look, I think that that's the best thing for them, but I'm concerned about some of the welfare and well-being issues that go alongside it. And I know we've talked about the stigma, but it's nonetheless a hurdle that I wish my child never had to face. And I understand that. And then you've got some parents who are philosophically opposed to the idea in its entirety or partially. And that's okay. It's absolutely fine to be philosophically opposed to anything that they wish to be. And I guess then we only really need to consider how great that difference or the opposition is. There's one thing to have an opposition and philosophical opposition, and therefore make a choice for yourself based on that opposition. And that's what all parents have. They have a choice. It's not as though they need, if I say, call them up and say, I think this is the best thing for your child, that the parents can't turn around and say, well, we don't think it is so. And we're actually philosophically opposed to to the idea of the class, so we don't want our child in it. And that's absolutely fine. But I guess what I wouldn't want to see, and when we do have a problem, is when the philosophical difference is great enough to cause, parents not only having that opinion for themselves, but trying to convince others of it and rallying people against or creating fear, basically fear-mongering and unnecessary rallying of parents against the direction that a school's heading in. And to those parents, we would suggest that perhaps if your opposition is that great, then perhaps there needs to be a school that you look at that isn't heading in that direction and that doesn't have any intent of trying to gain the benefits that we are by heading in that direction. And that seems quite harsh and stark, but really, if we're to have any sort of level of success, as we know, synergise, then together is better, and we need everybody to be on board. And those in opposition, that's fine. You can be in opposition. You don't have to be a vocal opposition, though. You can stay to diminish what is trying to be achieved, because surely As we know, positivity breeds positivity and negativity breeds negativity, and we don't need that in our school and in our community. So, other than that, the other thing that I would encourage parents is, it's a parental decision. We're giving a recommendation, so if I end up calling you, it's because I'm giving you a recommendation that the staff have all seen the way in which your child is confronted with the workload and the complexity of the curriculum being offered to them on a daily basis, and so we're making this recommendation too. It is a parent decision, and as much as you may discuss this with your child, I would encourage you that it's not their decision to make, because they're to think like a child, and a child's instant reaction may well be one of excitement, and I've certainly spoken to some students some students have spoken to their teachers, I should say, that are quite excited about this idea that they might get questions levelled at their ability so that they can have success. But there might be other students who say, well, I don't want to be taken away from his. I don't want to share with grade fives. I don't want to have to be, what if I'm called dumb because I'm in this class? And all those sorts of things, it's only natural for a child to think like a child. But given that I'm hoping you've got a hold of this paradigm shift that I'm asking you to think about their long-term well-being, and where they're at, say, in year 9, and their self-esteem and their how they see themselves as learners, and what sort of confidence levels they've got as learners if they were to continue as they were, if we were to ignore their needs at this point and just continue the status quo. So it's a lot to think about, and I'm sorry for that, but it's quite a complex issue, and it's not something that we've taken lightly. And I hope that this podcast / rehash of the information session helps to portray that. Please remember to send in your email to me over this weekend or over this coming week. It needs to be by the end of next week. Because over this 2 weeks, I'm dedicating this 2 weeks to having those conversations with parents who are both interested and who are on the teacher list as recommended for the accelerated learning class. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great weekend.